was chairman of the Rules and Regs at the time that we came up with them. Dr. Harkins is now chairman, so he'll have some input as well. We have two recommendations or choices. The first is to get rid of the frequently asked question determination and no change to the existing regulation as it is written. The second option would be to form a committee of individuals that have experience in sedation to further recommend changes to us. So that's where the Rules and Regs Committee stands. We have with us Dr. Matthias. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You had some comments toward all this?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. I'm very appreciative. And I'm going to speak about anesthesia safety and Regulation 29. My name is Hetty Matthias. I'm a graduate of Tufts University School of Medicine. I'm board certified in internal medicine, anesthesia, and critical care medicine. I've practiced here in Mississippi in this area for 32 years. Last night I calculated that I've administered anesthesia to over 10,000 pediatric dental patients since I began here, and might be more. Over the years, more than half of my practice has been in pediatric anesthesia, dental anesthesia. I've not had a fatality, a major morbidity, or a hospitalization of any of my patients. Many of these patients have been class 3 patients that are referred to me from the university hospital who have congenital cardiac disease and major neurologic diseases. The majority of children in my anesthesia practice, in dental anesthesia, are Medicaid patients, probably upwards of 90%. Throughout these years, I've never been paid more than $60 an hour to administer anesthesia.
Dr. Matthias, I do want you to
I
keep this
understand.
germane to Regulation 29, please.
I've done this because I love pediatric anesthesia, and I've been fortunate to work with some of the best pediatric dentists in Mississippi. My relationship and trust in their judgment and acumen is extremely high. I have no dog in this hunt. I am near retirement. My reasons for speaking with you today is because I hold patient safety in the highest regard, and pediatric anesthesia safety in an even higher regard. And I am here to help you formulate the best, strongest, and safest pediatric anesthesia regulations. You, the Board of Dentistry, in devising or revising Rule 29, have grave responsibilities in this matter. You, and only you, have the authority to ensure that Mississippi's pediatric patient population will undergo dental anesthesia in offices, if you choose to go that route, in only the safest manner. I have no inherent animosity towards the administration of general anesthesia in an office setting, providing that all safety measurements and measures are identical to those advised by the American Society of Anesthesia regarding the safe administration of anesthesia to pediatric patients. The place of anesthesia administration is unimportant. However, the standards of care for our most vulnerable patients must be exactly the same in an office, in a dental office, as they are in an ASC or hospital setting. In addition, anesthesiologists do not regard the route of administration of anesthesia to be important. To us, the depth of anesthesia is how we measure what anesthesia is. Light, moderate, and deep sedation to anesthesiologists describe the physiologic aspects of the patient and have nothing to do with the route of administration. It is very important for you to understand this, and perhaps it is time for the Board of Dentistry to discard this antiquated language regarding the route of administration. Here are the important decisions that you all have to ponder. And I hope that you ponder it with the help of the experts that are in this room today. And the issues that are most important to me are, one, the qualifications of anesthesiologists. I believe the minimum standard for any office anesthesiologist should be board certification or board eligibility in anesthesia. Y'all are going to have to work out what a dental anesthesiologist is, as the board does not recognize that subspecialty. I submit that it should be 3 years of postdoc training. That is the minimum for a physician anesthesiologist. 2, transfer agreements. Ambulatory surgical centers are required to have transfer agreements to a nearby hospital in case of an emergency. A dental office providing general anesthesia should have the same requirements. This transfer agreement can be obtained with an anesthesiologist or dentist with privileges to a local hospital. The transfer agreement facilitates the rapid and safe transfer of patients to an adequate level of care in the treatment of emergencies. Reliance on calling 911 in an emergency will not provide patients with the highest level of care. 3, medical equipment. This is not exhaustive. You can all look at the letter and we can all argue, but the basic minimums are size, age appropriate positive pressure bag and mask, oxygen supplementation, capnography.
Wait, let's not read the list.
Okay, all right. Medications must include rescue agents such as naloxone and flumazenil for reversal, and there are listed other agents that are required for treatment of emergencies in pediatric patients. Dantrolene is a drug that is required to be used in case anesthesia gases are used, and that will be up to the anesthesia provider. If, however, they use anesthesia gases, dantrolene, a drug used to reverse the effects of malignant hyperthermia, need to be stored in the dentist's office, and it is expensive. Post-anesthesia recovery unit. Post-anesthesia recovery units must contain, and I listed all the things which are essentially almost the same as the operatory. Most importantly, post-anesthesia recovery units must have qualified nurses to monitor patients after deep sedation and general anesthesia. The adage is this: if the procedure is the same as performed in an ambulatory surgical center, the recovery process should be identical. Any notion that these patients can be monitored or discharged by anyone other than the anesthesiologist or a qualified nurse is fraught with danger. The patient cannot be recovered by office personnel. Even if a qualified nurse is working in a recovery room, there is still substantial danger in the event of an emergency, because unlike an ASC or hospital, there will probably be no other qualified medical personnel to assist him or her in case of an emergency in the recovery room. Some will make arguments that light anesthetics are used and that patients don't need the same level of recovery as in an ambulatory surgical center. I assure you that an anesthetic is an anesthetic and is unaware of where it's being administered. Nothing should allow the board to cut corners in the post-anesthesia recovery unit and have lower standards than are required in other settings for the same anesthetic. Pre-anesthetic evaluation. The American Society of Anesthesia says that a preoperative evaluation for outpatient should be done probably as long as possible before the anesthetic is scheduled. This requires that a trained nurse, at the very least, make a telephone conversation with the patient, getting all the pertinent history for the parents, and that an anesthesiologist goes over the history prior to the administration of anesthesia. Also at
Can I
this,
ask you to hit your highlights, please?
Sure.
I can't. We've got that letter. We can-
okay, controlled substances. The board is going to be required to, I suspect, have people on the board who are hired by the board to take care of controlled substances in the dental offices. Inspections are going to need to be done by the dental board to look at equipment and controlled substances. Malpractice insurance should be commensurate with malpractice insurance for any physician anesthesiologist doing anesthesia in the state of Mississippi. And also, I would like to make certain that the board not in any way preclude physician anesthesiologists from providing anesthesia in a dentist's office. And in conclusion, in closing, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate the board is a voluntary and unpaid position, and that you give your time to ensure that you and you alone are the professionals who will decide on optimizing the highest standards for the children of this state, and that you have the responsibility to protect the public, and especially our children, from any unsafe practices of anesthesia. I would like to recommend that you put together a committee of experts in administration of anesthesia in the office setting, and then refer that to the board for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Saunders.
I'd like, if it's okay, for Dr. Nikki Evanzik with the Mississippi chapter of AAP to speak first, and then myself.
Okay. Please do keep it
It will be.
relevant to Reg 29 and short.
Thank you. My name is Alexa Ivanzik. I am the current chapter president of the Mississippi Academy, the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm a board certified pediatrician here in the state. And I am here as representing the pediatricians in the state with my role as the president of the chapter. And I thank you guys for letting me attend today to speak on this issue as well. We as a academy have some concerns about the safety of children undergoing dental restoration care using general anesthesia in a clinic setting. In pediatrics, we have a saying that children are not just small adults. They respond differently to medications, and they can respond unpredictably to medications in ways that adults do not. And so therefore they can't be treated like you would treat an adult. In the medical world, surgical procedures are not done under general anesthesia in the clinic setting. An example, ear, nose, and throat doctors do put tubes in adults in the office, but they don't in children because they have to anesthetize the children. And I, as a person who does neither tubes or dental work, would say that tubes are probably a easier procedure and a less time-consuming procedure than dental work is. And they take those kids to the operating room. In an emergency room, if a child comes in with a broken limb that needs to be surgically set, that doesn't require they be admitted to the hospital, they take those children to the operating room to sedate them. And in my own hospital in Tupelo, our anesthesiologists no longer sedate children for radiologic procedures because of concerns that they have about safety. And that's in the hospital setting. We are concerned as an academy about the appropriateness of the facilities and the equipment in these in-office procedures, making sure that all the practitioners involved, including the anesthesiologist and the dentist, and any support staff have the appropriate training and licensure that is required to do these procedures in the office. And we're also concerned about safe transport between a clinic and a hospital in the event that a bad outcome does occur. Although we prefer that the procedures would be done in an operating room or an outpatient surgical suite, we do realize that there are occasions where the procedures must be done within an office setting. And we realized that. And so we asked the board to look to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry and their expertise in children for recommendations on these issues. I do know that my national organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, is currently looking at recommendations and regulations for this, these procedures. The current Regulation 29 actually does a nice job of incorporating these recommendations from both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. And I would encourage you guys to continue to enforce the regulation consistently throughout the state for both anesthesia that's done in the operating room and anesthesia that's done in the office setting. Again, I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you letting me come and speak with you guys. And I know that you all, just like me, are just concerned about the safety and the well-being of our youngest and most vulnerable patients. So thank you very much.
Dr. Summer, you'd like to say something?
Thank you very much for letting me come and speak with you today. I appreciate your service, all of you. I'm Dr. Trice Sumner. I'm a board-certified pediatric dentist in Tupelo and president of the Mississippi Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. I'm here today speaking on behalf of our 60-plus pediatric dentists practicing in Mississippi. I want to make it clear that my remarks today on behalf of our membership are focused solely on pediatric patients and restorative dentists and the alarming increased use of deep sedation and general anesthesia in a dental office setting across our state. Pediatric dentists are the specialists trained to focus on the overall oral health of pediatric dental patients and have postdoctoral training and advanced education in pediatric dentistry in order to do so. Most of our members are board certified. As we and other pediatric specialists in medicine say all the time, children are not just tiny adults. They are uniquely vulnerable. This makes our members' input invaluable to crafting regulatory policy focused on pediatric dental patients. Our Academy membership represents 96% of the pediatric dentists practicing pediatric dentistry in Mississippi. None of the members of Mississippi Academy of Pediatric Dentistry provides general anesthesia in an office setting. We are the specialists trained to focus on the unique needs of pediatric dental patients, and none of us do this. We know pediatric dental patients better than anyone. I would like to repeat something you've already heard, and I'm sure you know. No other surgical medical procedure, even those far less involved and invasive, are performed on pediatric patients with deep sedations in an office setting. For years, Mississippi's dental regulations, specifically Rule 29, seem to effectively address child safety by ensuring that deep sedation occurred in office settings rarely and only when the operating dentist, not the anesthesiologist, but the operating dentist had a permit commensurate with the level of anesthesiology being administered, and thus the training to qualify for such a permit. Clearly, something in relatively recent history changed with the board's interpretation of those rules. However, when several of us wrote to you and asked what happened, when, why, and how did this change occur, we have been met with silence. I must tell you, I feel that the lack of open discussion on this safety concern is counterproductive to our profession as a whole, as we should all be working together to protect our patients. So I come to you and ask for your transparency and ask that we begin to work together. At a minimum, the Mississippi Academy of Pediatric Dentistry strongly urges this board to immediately return to the original interpretation of Rule 29 as it was written and intended, and enforce the portion requiring the operating dentist to have a permit commensurate with the level of anesthesia being administered, at least until further clarifications and revisions or a new regulation can be authored that speaks specifically to the restorative dentistry on pediatric patients in a dental office. Further, if the Mississippi State Dental Board and Mississippi licensed dentists wishes to recognize dental anesthesiologists in our state, our Academy believes the first step is to seek legislative authority recognizing that practice and produce a process of vetting for these individuals, since they are not recognized nationally as a specialty
and are not currently able to obtain hospital privileges in Mississippi where they are practicing itinerantly. From my reading of the current reg, it seems the intent of requiring the anesthesia providers to be on staff at a Mississippi hospital is a method of vetting these MD anesthesiologists and CRNA credentials. Our members also feel there needs to be a clarification of which regulatory body should have oversight of these providers, since at this time there is no one qualified in dentistry in the state of Mississippi to do so. We believe that when it comes to restorative dentistry on pediatric patients, the board should rely on our expertise at least as much as the board relies on an out-of-state provider whose specialty isn't recognized by the ADA or Mississippi state law. And lastly, we would again respectfully request that this board establish an advisory task force to examine how to appropriately establish specific guidelines for the use of general anesthesia for pediatric patients undergoing restorative procedures. Thank you very much.
Question. You said that no pediatric patients are taken to deep sedation in office setting. Does that include oral surgeons?
I'm not talking about oral surgeons. I'm talking about restorative procedures on pediatric patients.
Not oral surgeons. Do you include that?
That is not in my statement. My statement is speaking specifically about children having dental restorations performed in the dental office.
So an extraction is a dental procedure.
I'm speaking, I understand what you're going at, and I'm not speaking to what oral surgeons do. I do not think this has anything to do. I completely agree that oral surgeons are qualified to do dental procedures in their offices, but they are not doing restorative dental procedures. They're doing operative extractions, bone things.
With this regulation hospital includes all these, this has to be written so that it takes oral surgeons as well as every other specialty.
I understand, that's why I'm asking you to consider maybe doing a separate regulation based on children in the dental office having restorations done.
Do you have a general anesthesia permit?
I do not.
Is it your feeling that all these children will be able to afford an extra $10,000 to go in a hospital setting or more?
My hospital doesn't charge $10,000.
No.
I have a contracted rate of $2,000, and that's facility and anesthesia. I do agree with you that there is a consideration about the fact that it is a less expensive for those who have no medical coverage for dental procedures in a hospital, but it's not the safest.
I'm sure.
I want to make a motion when we're through with this conversation.
Any more to
I
add?
think Dr. Perkins,
from our standpoint, our concern is specifically about the safety of the child. And, it's like she said, there's around 60 of us pediatric dentists in the state. Mostly are board certified, and none of us that I'm aware of are utilizing this mode of anesthesia to take care of the pediatric patients in our community. And I just think it's not safe. And one thing that you hear a lot of is this is increasing the access to care. That's what you always get. There's this huge access to care for the the poorest children in the state of Mississippi, and it's really not true when it comes to treatment under general anesthesia for these children that have vast amounts of dental needs. I don't know any pediatric dentist that's booked out more than a week or two. I can have an emergency case done in 24 or 48 hours if I have to. That's just not it's not a real argument that you can have. And if there are much safer options, i.e. general anesthesia in a hospital or ambulatory setting, then why are we taking the risk of doing something that we know is not as safe as that setting? It just doesn't make It doesn't make any sense. And I would just, I guess that's all I'd say.
I want to speak to one thing you said about, I think you maybe implied that this board made the decision that regulation 29 would be interpreted differently than it had been in the past. And I want to just be sure you understand that that is not true. I always interpreted regulation 29 to read just as you did, that everybody had to have a commensurate permit. And just recently did I find out that some previous board had determined that that did not apply to dentists. So that
You're
wasn't this
talking
board.
about the general anesthesia permit?
Okay, regulation 29, as it's written, says that if somebody's gonna come in your office and administer any level of anesthesia, that both the operating dentist and the one delivering the anesthesia have to have comparable permits. That's the way I read it.
That's the way I read it too.
Now, some board at some point in the past has applied a interpretation that that did not apply to other dentists. So other dentists could come in the office and deliver some level of anesthesia to which the operator did not have.
So you're saying that the regulation as it's written, where it says anesthesia or CRNAs, the operating dentist is required to have a general anesthesia permit, doesn't apply to a dentist applying, giving anesthesia?
That is correct. That is the way some previous board has interpreted that.
Okay, well, it doesn't read that way.
You don't have to argue with me, because I agree with you. I'm telling you, it wasn't this board that did that. That was some previous board made that determination that that regulation did not apply to the dentist.
Okay, so I wasn't really implying anything other than, I know that the practice is happening, that there are operating dentists that are performing these procedures in clinics and dental offices, and they do not have general anesthesia permits. I know that to be factual.
That's
And so
correct.
my point is that I would like it to be enforced as written until we can come to a better solution.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. I think the confusion comes in with the frequently asked questions. And that's when it says that dentists can't hire another dentist to come in and do that. And we need to clarify that or eliminate that verbiage that gives dentists the latitude. In other words, I agree with Zelton that we need to, everybody needs to have the same level of training and permit that is being administered nowadays.
I'd like to make a motion. They were sent, I don't have the date on it, I'm looking at it, they were sent that frequently asked question, and I'll read it if you don't want to, but it is two of them. Rescind it. And go to the intent of the regulation, as you read it on 2D2, it says prior to employing or working in conjunction with an anesthesiologist. And I'm gonna skip down to this. The dentist must possess a current valid board-issued anesthesia permit, which is commensurate to the level of anesthesia being administered by the anesthesiologist. That's simple. I don't know why this was done years ago, but we need to do away with it, and we need to abide by what the regulation says.
Have a motion.
That's my motion.
I second the motion. And the motion is to keep the regulation
As is. I mean, to me, the regulation is very simple and plain and straightforward. I don't understand why this board years ago made this determination. I wasn't there, but I'm reading it totally different now, that's for sure.
Second.
Do away with the, whatever the,
Both frequently asked
both of
questions.
them that deal with this sedation issue.
Verbiage maybe
We'll
is
rescind
to
those
say-
two opinions, and to me, and I'm just gonna make this statement, it's, the regulation does not address the anesthesiologist, it addresses the operating dentist. It says the operating dentist has to have a commensurate license. If he employs somebody that's gonna either sleep somebody, do IV sedation or whatever, I think this opinion went away from that. And we need to stick to what the regulation says. And it's talking about the operating dentist who employs one of these has to have a commensurate state ordinance valid permit to do it. So I think that's what,
And the training that goes along with.
well, that's part of the board, that's part of the permit.
Yes, I just wanted that on the record.
All right, is there any other discussion on that motion?
Okay, so what about, the question is, what about the people who are currently in violation since the complaint was made?
They are not in violation as of right now, based on the frequently asked question. We are making the determination today. Stan, how long would it be before it's in
The
effect?
frequently asked question is not a rule or regulation, it's an interpretation. Those can be withdrawn at any time.
So it'd be effective immediately.
So you're not changing the regulation.
Correct.
You're not. You're just removing what is obviously an ambiguous and confusing response to frequently asked questions.
Right, but they're operating dentists who do not have general anesthesia permits.
Well, the problem is, we don't know that until somebody complains and give us a complaint to go there and investigate.
Dr. Ken Johnson sent a complaint.
Correct.
Sent
We
3
didn't have
letters.
At the time.
specifics of,
Well, at the time,
At
that's
the
okay.
time, that was not a violation.
We've not rescinded until we're talking about it
Today,
now.
okay, so we.
Up until now, it's been okay.
Can I add to my motion? We haven't voted on it yet. All right, can we also send a letter out from the state board of government members with this, restating the resolution, regulation 29 to all dentists in the state of Mississippi?
All dentists or all sedation providers? or
All dentists in the state of
I
Mississippi.
think we got that thing that, we sent them out,
last thing.
that flash it out, like, what, Karen can handle that easy.
Okay, any further discussion?
I would also like to, make a motion to amend that.
We got a motion on the floor.
I want to add one thing before we vote on that.
Sure.
I kind of sense maybe a little bit of, among some of that dental anesthesiologists may not be highly qualified individuals. And although I agree with how we're getting ready to vote on Regulation 29, dental anesthesiologists, from what I've been able to research, are pretty highly qualified individuals. And the fact that they don't have a specialty recognition right now may be more political than anything else. They sued certain states and got specialty recognition. And, you know, they are highly qualified, and if they operate within the constraints, I consider them to be the same level of MD, anesthesiologist, or you know, whoever is qualified to administer anesthesia. And we may have to deal with that at some point in the future. But still, I think we're making the right decision heading in this direction.
I agree with you, I just have one thing to say about that. As our Practice Act and dentistry defines states, there's nothing in there that talks about a dentist that is only giving pharmacological aids as an anesthesiologist would. And so dentistry defined does not address a dentist anesthesiologist who is not performing any sort of operative or surgical procedure. And so I feel like that if we're all gonna be, if there's gonna be any oversight ability to this particular process, which I think we all agree, as far as anything that we do, we've got to have oversight of what we're doing. That's the whole point. And I just truly believe that it needs to be at least thought about and addressed. I'm not saying the people that are providing this are not qualified. I believe that you are right, that they are.
The
You
reason
did
they don't
imply it
have,
in your letter.
I implied
You did
one.
imply that they were not.
Well, I just implying that there's no oversight for them.
the
And under
reason
the
they don't
certain
have specialty
regulations.
recognition right now is because the House of Delegates of the ADA did not approve them. The new regulatory agency of the ADA that's going to establish these specialties law, I'm almost 100% sure it's going to approve dental anesthesia as a new dental specialty.
And so then we will, as a state of Mississippi, then we will
It'll
add
still
them
be up
to
to
our
the
general
state to
practice act
recognize
as
whether
a.
that holds true, but they will have specialty recognition, in my opinion, short.
Call the question.
Dr. Mathias, you had a comment?
I just want to ask the board at this time, when a person who does not live in this state gets a license in this state and calls themselves a dental anesthesiologist, when you are credentialing that person, what are your requirements?
Okay, we're not talking about that, that's not the main focus.
I think it's
Question's been
very
called.
important.
Question's been
We got
called.
a question,
Call for the
Call the
question.
question.
Call for the question.
okay, all in favor of the motion to call the question? Opposed? Okay, question's been called, we're gonna vote on the motion as written.
Motion to rescind both frequently asked questions relating to the sedation of patients in the dental office and send a letter restating or reaffirming Reg 29 to all Denniston State.
All right. One thought, real quick, is there a possibility there's a little blurb somewhere else that we might be missing by using that verbiage versus just saying we want to go by what is in Reg 29 strictly with no,
Making the motion, or keeping the
you're
motion.
saying specifically two frequently asked questions.
Rescind
Take
those.
those out, and I think that solves the
Is
problem.
there a chance there's something else somewhere else? That's my only concern.
We
You state amend the frequently asked questions to be consistent with Rule Regulation 29 as it is now written.
Okay. Amend frequently asked questions. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
I would like to make a point that the next frequently asked question just asks if a CRNA or an anesthesiologist states my patient for me in the dental office, what kind of training must I have? And that answer is correct, and that follows Regulation 29. I would just say any anesthesiologist, or reword that to include either the dental anesthesiologist along with the CRNA and the MD anesthesiologist. I would make that motion, yes. To
All right.
clarify that.
We're talking about frequently asked questions, comment. I don't know if we can pull that up or. It states,
That's
if a CRNA or an anesthesiologist sedates my patients for me in my dental office, what kind of training must I have? Changing that sentence to say, if an anesthesiologist sedates my patients, do you leave it at that? Or is there other verbiage?
a qualified, licensed, qualified person with an anesthesiologist license from, board. In other words,
All right, let's move.
well, that,
What are you asking?
an MD and a CRNA.
What if you just added dental or medical anesthesiologist also?
Or the dental
This is a frequently asked question, it's not regulation.
It's not a regulation, it's just to clarify.
This board has the statutory authority to interpret its rules and regulations, so the FAQ is in a process of doing that.
Correct.
All you're doing is helping the public to understand what the intent is behind the rule and reg.
Okay.
Just add dental anesthesiologist to that statement, and that would be fine.
Our problem, I guess, is that there is no recognition anywhere in our statute of a dental anesthesiologist.
I disagree with you, that's not, and I'll read it to you. I know you said it, but here's what the definition says. Dentistry is defined as evaluation, diagnosis, prevention, and/or treatment, non-surgical, surgical, or related procedures of diseases, disorders, and or conditions of the oral cavity, blah, blah, blah. That related procedures falls under anesthesia. And an anesthesiologist could be defined in this, and I just asked our attorney, he agreed with me. So that's an open-ended, that related procedures is open-ended. So there you go.
If you don't interpret that way,
But
you
we'll
got too
go
much
back
difference
to
up
another, it's a political, that's already been litigated. Dental anesthesiology can be recognized as a specialty by another entity other than the ADA. That's already been litigated in Texas, so
I understand that, but I didn't know that we had in Mississippi.
we don't have to have it. Do you know we have TMJ specialists that are claiming to be TMJ specialists? I mean, we have no authority to say you're a specialist or not as a board. But we can recognize, just like we recognize anesthesiologists or CRNA, we can recognize a dental anesthesiologist.
What
I mean,
are
there
their
are
qualifications?
there are graduate programs out there that are called dental anesthesiologists. So I'm not agreeing with what they're saying. I think it's clear what it says. The person, if somebody's putting somebody to sleep, the operating dentist has to have a commensurate permit from the board, period. And whether it's a dental anesthesiologist or a anesthesia or a CRNA or whoever comes down in the future. My focus was on operating dentists, because that's what the safety is about.
Okay, there's still a motion to modify this frequently asked question as dental anesthesiologist.
I see no problem with adding that in here.
There's a second. Discussion? All in favor of adding dental anesthesiologist to that frequently asked question? Ms. Griffin?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain. Opposed.
Who abstains? Somebody abstained.
And all the yeses, please show with a raise of hands. Conway, Cliff, Hawkins. Dr. Moore. Dr. Donald.
No.
One, two, three, four. I got you as in that. So with four votes, the motion passes.
That passed. All right, next thing on our agenda is the executive director job description approval. We'll pull that up. We already have the numbers that are going to go into the salary range that's set by the state at $68,000 to $90,000. This would be item number 6. And I would ask, is anybody wanting to change any of the verbiage prior to the very end? With that, we need to look at the very end. Education experience, minimum requirement. What would the board like to set as a minimum requirement for the next ED for education?
What did Denise say?
I would say that we don't want to hamstring ourselves in that and say that you've got to have a PhD. Then we limit our little masters, but then we limit our field. We might be. You might have somebody with 20 years of experience, really qualified, but not have that education. That's a consideration.
I don't think necessarily a master's degree is required to take it back here. But a verified bachelor's,
Verified what?
bachelor's degree,
Bachelor's degree?
verified.
All right.
I don't know how true it
Stan?
I've been known to nudge the board member from time to time.
We have a motion? Is that level or? Which level?
What'd you say on experience?
We're not getting the experience yet. We're doing only education.
We're doing one at a time.
But I'm concerned that we might find somebody that's really, really experienced that may not meet the education level if we set it too high.
Yeah, if
And
it's,
vice versa.
I'm talking about a minimum.
In your verbiage, couldn't you put the word should have and?
Instead of must.
Have you looked at some of the samples or some of the examples that are already on the State Personnel Board website? Because oftentimes you will see a minimum education requirement, and then there'll be additional information that allows you to offset the education by experience. Certain numbers of experience would, for someone may perhaps you have a doctorate level program, but it might say a master's level person with 8 years of experience or something like that. There is some verbiage out there. If you'd like for us to take a look at it, maybe circulate it to you, instead of trying to craft it on the spot, I think you're gonna, but there is some
My concern is getting this out.
Yeah, I understand.
Advertising as soon as possible.
Okay.
That's the delay if we don't have another board meeting for another month.
Well, if y'all want to just talk about it, figure out kind of generally what you want, and then we can nail down the language and circulate it, and if we need to, we can do a telephonic conference.
Okay, and what you're saying is great. Maybe use what she suggested right there. And what would be the education level that we're saying?
What are you looking at?
Bachelor's?
Do you want a dentist?
Yeah, that's all right. Bachelor's.
Okay, well, I'm kind of holding you for that.
I'm gonna wait until you get there.
And then experience. How much? 5, 10. Experience is.
More stable, what type of experience?
Okay, so our experience was we need to look at people that have management experience.
Experience with regulatory board.
It's a whole different thing. That may narrow that field.
That'll narrow it down.
So where we at?
Dr. Conley, do you want to say something like managerial, legal, or dental preferably?
I like those, but we may find somebody that's not in that. I don't want to get it too tight, is my concern. The intention would be we have a 3-person panel to go through the initial applications, and then we will present the initial applications to the full board for you all to consider before we move forward with anybody. So you're gonna get to see and say and accept an application before we talk to them. Sorry for moving. All right.
I would think some legal, or medical legal dental knowledge would be.
I just checked on the material, it's partial, about 6% of it's through, bringing it down.
You could use language like preference will be given to those who have had. I don't know
Okay, here we have Dr.
I see what you're saying.
All right, we still don't have experience. Those are thoughts. I'm looking for y'all. You can say managerial, you can say executive type.
I'm just gonna read from this description, and it says education, a master's degree from an accredited 4-year college or university, and experience, 10 years of administrative experience in the mental health related area.
So if we just say 10 years of administrative experience, and that can leave it wide
Well,
open.
this job does pay up to $167,000. Y'all might have to pay.
I don't think it is necessary on there. I mean, I think that
So bachelor's degree, we're gonna, I think, stay with that, but experience is.
experience in administration.
Experience in how long, how much? Administrative experience. Very, very wrong.
I think we can be liberal here, and we can always find out if
All right, so at least least a bachelor's degree at an accredited college and administrative experience. Do we want to put a time frame on that?
Minimum knowledge of medical and dental terms or something. Well,
You put that, and then how many people do you exclude, because how many people know dental?
they got a lot of folks that might be able to get them over there.
You might miss that golden nugget if we say dental and.
I think that's our job.
Yeah, we gotta talk through, we can train them.
Anybody.
For this job,
Is this the director dealing with examples?
it's already with.
A bachelor's degree from an accredited four-year college or university in business administration, public administration, or related field, and 5 years of managerial experience and work related to the below described duties, or graduation from a standard four-year high school or GED equivalent, and 9 years of related experience, 5 years of which must have included line or functional administrative supervision. Substitution statement, above graduation from a four-year high school or equivalent GED program and related experience may be substituted on an equal basis for education, and related education may be substituted on an equal basis for experience. She just printed this out until he was already online at the SPP for this particular job class.
All right, are we in favor of that? Let's move.
So moved.
Second. All right, Harkins made a motion. Steve seconded
I would,
to accept what Odetta read.
I would like for us to consider, having a dentist in this role.
That's
Heavily consider
not
that.
excluded.
I'm just making that statement.
Okay.
And I think it's something we need to consider. I've heard from a lot of dentists in the state saying that would be a very good thing if we had a dentist.
This will be sent out, nationally, this job description, so there may be a lot of applications.
I'd say so.
Any other thoughts, comments on this?
So apply.
It could be worse, most medical licensure boards are run by employers.
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
$68 to $90 is
Run by
about
budget.
I don't know what to talk about.
All right, we've approved that. Moving on to item number 7, board policy on handbooks and NBP manual. Mark, is this a, short topic?
It's very short, very short.
Go ahead.
I visited with Lisa Dunn with the Department of Finance and Physical Management, talked about policy and procedures. She recommended that on an interim, we accept the MAP manual and the state employee handbook from the personnel board as interim policy, knowing that we're gonna be doing a lot of adjustments over the next 3 to 6 months related to this policy. And some of the things that I think, that I've made a list of things that we would need to consider. We talked about maybe a budget oversight committee and how that's operational and that kind of thing. We need to write, if we're gonna do that, we need to write duties and responsibilities for that group and that kind of thing. We need to have a travel policy that's specific to our board, that's not outside of state regs. We need to have, we were talking about procurement cards in our budget meeting. We'll have to have some policies related to that. If we get involved in the fleet versus rental or owning a car, we'll have to have policies on, if we go there, we'll have to have policies on how to use it that's specific to our situation. Because of our, and I asked the question to Lisa Dunn related to one of the things we got dinged on in the audit was how we handle money. And basically she said you can't go outside of what the regs are and the laws, but you can make a policy specific to our, like, number of employees and how we handle inside the internal portion of it. I just brought some stuff up and talked to another via email about the per diem, and we actually have a law, it's 25-369, that specifically addresses per diem and how we use it for our own business. But Lisa did say, just because we worked on an hour of our time, doesn't mean we have to pay ourselves an hour for the whole per diem. So that's something we can formulate as a board. It can be less than that, or it could be that. It's just according to what we decided to do. So, Stephen's on this little subcommittee with me, and we're gonna get together and start pulling these things together and bring it to you piecemeal as we go down this path. And also, VFA's good at it, but you heard her say they will not write them for us. But Denise has told me that she can help us write them, specifically write it out. She's been with enough boards and has, so we may get to a point where we're asked for some more funding to hire her to help us do some writing in that area. So it's a lot of work to be done moving forward, but, I just want to kind of give y'all a quick update of where we're going.
So it is your recommendation that we adopt what's already out there and then later amend it?
Yeah, well, we're gonna, that's always, because we're a state agency, we have to have that. We can't go outside of this. It's what I'm gonna bring forth in the future is adoption of policy specific to our agency. That is not out, it may be in here, but it's gonna be specific to our agency. We can't go against what we're adopting today.
We already have this then?
Well, she said we need to adopt it as interim policy. So that's why I recommend that we do adopt these two manuals as interim policy.
Interim.
Yes,
Is there a motion?
I'll make it.
I'll second.
Mark and Steve. All right, discussion? If I understand, we're accepting these as a temporary or interim guideline, but we're gonna update the policy as we go, because there's a lot. Tackle it all today. All right? All in favor? Opposed? So moved. Let's go ahead and look at the NDEAF meeting. Roy and Delta.